The sun has gone down at Hangman's Hill, and the ghost at Misery Corner isn't walking tonight. So, welcome to the Weird Tales Radio Show, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, magic, and folklore. And now, here's your host, writer, award-winning journalist, best-selling author, and sometime werewolf hunter, Charles Christian.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Weird Tales Radio Show. I'm Charles Christian, and thank you so much for tuning in again. The big event in this week's show is the second and final part of our interview with global conspiracies expert Ole Dammegard. Now, I know I promised you the return of my partner in crime, Janie, but we've had to hold back her latest story until next week to make room for this interview. But she really will be back next week. But first, let's have some paranormal, folklore and weird news. Terry Lovelace, who we interviewed on this show earlier this year about his UFO sightings and alien abduction experiences, has been in touch to draw our attention to some legislation currently making its way through the US Congress at the moment. It's called the Intelligence Authorizations Act for the fiscal year 2021, and it was published on the 17th of June. The part Terry finds intriguing is the section from the Select Committee on Intelligence, which talks about advanced aerial threats and the Office of Naval Intelligence Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force. The document we've been provided with says the Select Committee remains concerned that there is no unified comprehensive process within the US federal government for collecting and analysing intelligence on unidentified aerial phenomenon, despite the potential threat. It goes on to say the Select Committee requires the heads of US intelligence agencies, both military and civilian, so that includes the FBI, to submit a report within 180 days of the enactment of the Act to the Congressional Intelligence and Armed Services Committees on Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon, also known as anomalous aerial vehicles. Now, this definition of unidentified aerial phenomenon and anomalous vehicles would seem to include not just things like drones and stealth aircraft belonging to potentially unfriendly nations, but also UFOs. We'll see, as a lot can happen in politics in 180 days or 6 months, including the outcome of this year's presidential elections on the 3rd of November in the US. Over in the world of folklore, we've run a number of stories on this show about the medieval case of the Green Children of Woolpit in Suffolk. Were they alien visitors or lost fairy children? And also Black Shuck, the demon hound of East Anglia. Well, now there's a musical version available of these stories. They've been put together by Wivenhoe, that's near Colchester in Essex, poet Martin Newell, and the Suffolk folk group the Hosepipe Band. They've made a handful of albums of Martin's poetry set to music, including the long poems Black Shuck and The Green Children of Woolpit. And while the lockdown means they are currently not performing live gigs, you can find their music and buy their albums online at www.hosepipebandmartinnewell.co.uk. That's all one word, Hosepipe Band Martin Newell. Newell is spelled Newell. My thanks to Patrick Sargent, who is a presenter on one of the radio stations that syndicates this show, for this story he spotted in the Daily Mail and forwarded on to me. A long-forgotten graveyard containing the remains of 115 individuals was discovered in a Polish forest by construction workers working on a trans-European motorway. The graveyard has been dated to the late 16th to mid-17th centuries, and at least 70% of the skeletons belong to children. All the burials were laid out in a way that would be appropriate to a Christian burial, as distinct from a mass burial after a plague outbreak or battle. So it does seem there was no mystery here, except that the graveyard belonged to a community that has long since vanished. However, what is intriguing is many of the corpses had been buried with coins in their mouths. And in fact, it was the coins that helped date the remains, as the most recent were from the reign of John Casimir Vasa II, who ruled from 1648 to 1668. But there's more, because the coins are known as obols, or more correctly, Charon's obol. And the origin was in the pagan pre-Christian belief that the coin would be used to pay Charon, the ferryman, who conveys the souls of the newly dead across the river Styx that divides the world of the living from the world of the dead. It began as a tradition among the ancient Greeks. The earliest examples excavated to date go back to the 4th century BC, so that's 2,400 years ago. And they continued into the Roman era and then, surprisingly, on into the Christian era. It's therefore not at all surprising that Polish Catholics of the 16th century were still practicing this ritual. In fact, in 1878, Pope Pius IX was entombed with a coin in his mouth, and there remain anecdotal tales that this is still carried out today. In fact, on a personal note, as a child growing up in Yorkshire in the 1950s, I was told that one of my uncles had been buried with 2 pennies, one placed over each eye, so he could pay Charon the ferryman his fare. Now here's the second part of our interview with Ole Dammegard. You'll recall last week he was talking about the deep state / New World Order and the current coronavirus pandemic. In this week's show, we switch to the subject of assassinations, starting with the Swedish Prime Minister Olof Palme, and then going on to discuss the deaths of John Lennon, Bob Marley, and Princess Diana. It's a grim story, but Ole does end on a positive note. You say you've been interested in the assassination of the Swedish Prime Minister Olof Palme, which has always been one of those mystery things because everybody thinks Sweden is a nice country full of happy, shiny people and nothing very much happens, and then the Prime Minister is gunned down in the street walking home from the cinema. And now there's been a development in it quite recently, haven't they, where the Swedish authorities have said they now know who did it, although conveniently he died some years ago, so we can't actually ask him any questions. Well, can you give us your take on that one?
Well, my comment is, it is such a joke. It is such a joke. And as soon as the investigation, like 3-4 months ago, they said, now we, within a few limited time space here, we're going to present you the killer, or we're going to close down the whole investigation. And I said, absolutely no way. This is just a matter of they will blame it on, and I thought, this exact guy because he's dead. And then they can say, well, very sorry, he's dead, but at least we found him. And then now we can leave this whole thing with a flag on the top, and hallelujah, baby, we are out of it. But this is like 34 years down the line, and it's the most expensive murder investigation in the history of the world. The Swedish taxpayers have paid more than 2 billion Swedish kroner for this investigation that I would very strongly suggest was part of the crime from day one as a cover-up. The thing is, I have spent 12 years intense on this assassination. I moved up there after the assassination. This is after I spent many years studying JFK, Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy, Abraham Lincoln, and other high-level cases. And so I had no idea that these cases had any kind of connection to start with. But over the years, I found more and more of the same forces behind this. And the Olof Palme case is, I tell you, it's very similar to the JFK assassination. They say one crazy lone guy who shot him down for no reason. He mistook him for his drug dealer because they had the same furry hat. And that's about it. Thank you and goodbye. That is what, as far as they come with the official story, costing 2 billion Swedish taxpayer krona. So, but the real truth, once you start digging, oh my God, it is so multi-layered, it is so complex, and it's taken me many, many years to find as much of the truth that I've been able to. What I did in the late 80s, he's said to have been killed February 86, and I moved up to Stockholm not long after just to get involved. And so I got involved with a small little group of what they were called the private investigators in the media. Totally ridiculed, totally, everybody was trying to discredit us. But anyway, I was a very young guy and they were mostly older men, but high level people, like lawyers, judges, former police officers, former intelligence people, but highly, highly concerned about what had happened in their country. So what I did was I went around and I interviewed all of them for hours and hours and hours. So what I did was I collected, also I copied all of their investigation. And so I had like mountains of documents in the end from all of these individuals who all of them were very capable of investigating this thing, but they were focusing on like maybe one area, the other one another area. And so I've written a book called Coup d'etat in slow motion, and it's 945 pages or something like that. The official story to this day would fit in on less than 1 page. So either I'm really good at making up fantasies like Harry Potter, or there is something more to it than the official story. And I would strongly suggest that that is the case. And over all of these years, I believe that I identified or also been part of solving this mystery to like 95%. And the official investigation about 0%. So the thing is also, we're back to this interesting thing about controlled media, because that is it's a tricky one to deal with, especially I'm a former journalist, and I used to be proud of that title. But then over the years, I've been more and more confused when I've been meeting up with also high-level journalists that have just turned out to be very disillusioned and disempowered, and just like so many have said to me, I don't know what happened, there are no real journalists anymore. It's just these young people running around, the breaking news here, like the neighbor's cat is up in the tree, breaking news here. I mean, there's all this, it needs to go live, and no one is doing the research. Mm-hmm. And then you see, but how is that possible that no one is really digging into it? And then you come into the power structure again. Who owns these media outlets? And so I remember I spoke to a guy, a former assassin, and he said that when you look at operations on that level, there's very often 2 conspiracies going on. 1, the crime itself, and 2, a conspiracy of silence. There is like, you are met with silence. The official story or nothing. Mm-hmm. So someone like myself, it's like I've been up against like a glass wall, and I've been knocking doors for many, many, many years. And I tell you, there was one really interesting thing that happened to me was I used to work as a musician for TV4 as well, doing, jingles and stuff for mm-hmm. some programs. And so that had me, the back door was open into TV4. And so that's one of the main channels. And so there was this documentary made in 1996 called Murder in Stockholm by two German guys who made an incredible job starting to show part of the real truth. And this documentary won prize for best documentary in Germany, Switzerland, and France, meaning heavyweight journalistic findings, possibly. So anyway, I was blown away by this one. I was so happy when I saw this because it was only aired in the other countries. So, but I was sent it on a VHS cassette. So I thought, this is amazing. So I went to the office of, they were sort of the most hard-hitting journalist in Sweden officially. I mean, the people we say like, oh my God, he's so fantastic. He's such a Pulitzer Prize type person. So I thought, fantastic, I'll go and knock on the door. I knocked on the door. This guy, I don't know his name, but some high level, you see him on the screen all the time. And so I said, hello. And then I said, I've got something for you that might be of interest. It's about, okay, he said, so what is that? I said, it's about the assassination of Olof Palme. He said, okay, interesting. So he said, what's about? So I started talking about, it was like what actually happened there with connections to South Africa, right extreme police officers and stuff. And he then stopped me and said, no, sorry to interrupt, but we've had to decide what he called a company policy to stay with one theory, because he said there's so many theories out there, it's just confusing. So we have decided to stick with the official patsy. And I'm like, okay. But I said, but why don't you just watch the video? If it's crap, you can just dump it in the garbage over there. Or if it's good, you might consider airing it, because it's the population of Sweden. I think they have a right to know. And he said, thank you, but no thank you, and just closed the door in my face. And that was the first time when I just felt, this is very bizarre. If he is this journalist that he officially is, and he's been given prizes, why is he not even interested? And then I went down south to the newspaper where I used to work, and that summer there was this woman working extra there, and she had the year before been given what is called the Golden Spade, which is a it's a top prize in Sweden for journalists. So I thought, whoa, here's someone who would be interested. Mm-hmm. And so I said, hello. Her name is Ingrid Citron. So I said, hi, how are you? And she said, hi, good to see you. What are you up to? And I said, I'm seriously digging into this case. Oh, that's so interesting. And I said, would you mind if we just have a coffee? And she said, no, let's go for it. So I thought, here is someone who is fearless, who is a really good journalist, who's been given awards. She would be interested. So we sat down, I started explaining, and after 5 minutes she said, thank you, but listen, I need to go. And I said, but what's up? No, she said, well, if what you are saying is true, then I have to write about it. It's my duty. And I said, yes. And she said, well, thank you and goodbye. And she just left. I was like, what is going on here? And then I did the music to the news programs, or one of them. And one of my friends was working as a graphic artist in the newsroom at TV4. So I went to speak to him, and he said, it's interesting that you say it, because sometimes, they have these meetings, they begin 4 a.m. in the morning because the news has to start at 6 or whatever. Yeah. And so they have these meetings, and then the chief editor, or whatever you call him, he says, okay, the headlines tonight or to this morning is this and this and this. And he said there were a few times where there was some really heavy-duty news, like this, the sinking of this ferry MS Estonia and other stuff, which was actually a ship that was blown up, almost killing 1,000 people. I have that in the book as well. Anyway, he said there were specific mornings when there were people that he did not know, like Men in Black, who was just sitting there very discreetly in the background. And he noticed that when the chief editor was... he was always looking at them. So he said, like, okay, the headlines today, we're going to do this. And then he noticed that they just made a little sign. And he said, no, wait a second, we'll go for this one. So my friend noticed that several times that this guy that was officially in charge was being directed by these people in suits. I mean, who were they? And this is where there's in Sweden, and it's like that in many countries, they have what is called the psychological defense, which is there to direct the attention of the NATO in the direction which is best for national security. Whatever that word means, national security, I would say very, very often that security is for the people who are carrying out these black ops. That's who they want to cover.
Yes. I'm conscious of the time, but one other topic, if you've got time for it, the killing of John Lennon. Can understand why people might want to kill one of the Kennedys, politicians, or someone like Martin Luther King. But what about John Lennon, who, if you take it on one level, well, he was just a musician, and yes, he made controversial statements, but why John Lennon and not, say, Bob Dylan or someone like that?
It's a very good question, not easy to answer, because there are a lot of proof coming forward now that the Beatles were actually a creation of the Tavistock Institute, and which is a big thing to get into, so I don't even want to go there. Yeah. But if that is true, that could also be part of the reason why John Lennon was taken out, because he, at the end of his life, was talking about, I've had enough, I'm going to go out openly about this. And you also have to see that out of the 4 Beatles, 3 of them were killed, or you had Paul McCartney, who, according to many researchers, I try to avoid this area, died in a car crash 1966 and was replaced by another person, which is now coming forward more and more and more. It's right under the surface that is true. George Harrison was almost stabbed to death inside his own home, and John Lennon was killed. So all 3 of these individuals died very brutally. So, George Harrison didn't die but he died in cancer, cancer later on. Cancer is also something that can be, the possibility of weaponizing cancer. Many people have died of very fast-spreading cancer, including friends of mine, which is very hard to trace back. But when you speak to professional assassins, this is nothing unusual. I'm not saying about George's death, I do not know. But he was, if we take away that part, then John Lennon was a very controversial and dangerous figure for someone like J. Edgar Hoover, the head of the FBI. He hated John Lennon, hated him. And the whole military-industrial complex also hated this guy because they want war and destruction. That's the name of the game. Death is also making billions. And so when someone stands up and says peace, love, and understanding, and get millions to listen to him, this person becomes a threat, just like with Bob Marley. So he was about to do a comeback. He had just recorded this album together with Yoko Ono, and he was planning a major tour called the Peace Tour, I think, that could have turned into a global peace tour that could have affected millions and millions of people, which is not what the deep state wants. So he was at a point where he was just making a step, and that is when it happens. When people have, if they are allowed to take one step forward or go public with some information that only they know, that's where the biggest threat is. And that is when people are taken out. Because to take out someone is quite messy, and it can cause a lot of so-called blowback for the people carrying them out. So they try to go for destroying the character, trying to set them up or stop them else in other ways than termination. But here, this is what they chose. So we're being told that Mark Chapman is the guy that shot John Lennon, and that is absolutely not true. He was standing to the right of the limo. They came back, they stopped outside the Dakota building, and Yoko Ono went out first. John came like 5-6 meters behind her, or yards, and Mark Chapman was stood to the right of the car. So John Lennon continued 5-6 meters, and then a series of fast shots were fired. John Lennon was hit. All of the shots hit him straight, almost point blank, from the left side. But Mark Chapman was way behind him and to the right. So who was standing to the left? And this specific evening was a man called Jose Perdomo. He's called a doorman, but he disappeared very early from the net, everything. But I managed to recover a lot of information about him. And this Jose Perdomo was not just a doorman. For 10 years, he was the highest ranking officer in an ultra-secret hit team called Operation 40, which is key in the JFK assassination, Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy, and multiple other assassinations around the world. And so we have this top assassin standing right there where the shots is said to have been fired from. It was also Jose Perdomo who ran up to Mark Chapman, put the gun in his hand and said, "Do you know what you just did? You just killed Lennon." And at that point, there was a witness saying it was like Chapman just turned into like a zombie. So he was just standing there waiting to be picked up. And here are where we see possible signs of MK-Ultra in the cases of Sirhan with Robert Kennedy and also with Mark Chapman, where they're just like standing. Chapman was just like a zombie. And there was also another shooter who sometimes go under the description of the carpenter and so on. His name, as far as I've been able to find out, is Clyde Forshaw. He is still alive. He's one of modern time's worst serial killers, still to be exposed. He lives in Toronto, if he's still alive, together with his cousin, Walter Dubinsky, both of them deeply involved also in the assassination of JFK. And it was also Clyde Forshaw that placed the bomb in JFK Jr.'s plane. So these people they're using them over and over. They're recycling the same team over and over and to many of these high cases. So who shot John Lennon? Jose Perdomo and also Clyde Forshaw. He was the backup shooter. Mark Chapman, absolutely innocent. And the people behind this whole thing, the paymaster for this ultra-secret hit team, Operation 40 or Group 40, was George Bush Sr. from Dallas and onwards. And these people followed him very, very closely through his career, including Barry Seals, the guy that Tom Cruise is now portraying in a movie, the pilot, in the whole enterprise, the Iran-Contras enterprise under Oliver North. Mm-hmm. He was in Operation 40. Felix Rodriguez, who's also key in many of these whole thing, Operation 40. The Watergate burglars, Operation 40. E. Howard Hunt, Operation 40. The people around the Robert Kennedy assassination, also Operation 40. And many of the shooters in the ambush in Dealey Plaza, Operation 40. It's a super important group to become aware of if you want to understand what actually happened from the 60s and onwards.
That's fascinating. So Operation 40 and John Lennon, again, another element of the deep state, a critic and someone who could disrupt their activities.
It's the same story over and over and over again. And it's so sad because often it's very beautiful individuals that are standing up fearlessly, knowing what they are putting at stake. I mean, they know that their lives are on the stake, and still they stand in their truth. And if they are loved enough, that's where the danger comes, because then millions of people are listening to them. You got Bob Marley, you got Lady Di, you got John Lennon, these type of individuals, loved by millions and millions. So when someone like that says something, then suddenly millions of people are listening and they become a threat, and that's why they're eliminated. So Bob Marley is a murderer as well, but a slow kill that most people are not aware of. They think he just died from cancer, which is true, but the whole thing was he was becoming a massive symbol of resistance for minorities, for people of African American background, but in many African countries as well. So the deep state, the global deep state, were getting freaked out because Africa was about to start boiling and at the point of liberating themselves. So they wanted to go in and shut the whole thing down. And so with the way that Bob Marley was taken out was that he had just experienced an assassination attempt and barely survived. He was very, very close. His wife was hit, I think, with 5 shots, and his manager was also hit with multiple shots in the kitchen, in their own kitchen. And one of the people shooting into the kitchen was also part of Operation 40. It's the same group popping up everywhere. Anyway, so Bob Marley was, the people around him was freaking out, and he was surrounded by bodyguards. And so I think it was about a week or so after that, Bob Marley was approached by an American documentary maker who said that we would very much like to make a documentary about you and what you stand for and all of it. And so Bob said, for sure. So the bodyguards let this guy in. And he said, well, one of the first things I want to is to give you a gift as a thank you. And Bob Marley was very much, a sporty guy, really into soccer. And also he loved jeans and he loved cowboy boots. So the gift was a pair of cowboy boots. And I've spoken to a guy who was present when this whole thing happened. And he said Bob Marley, he got really excited. And then he put on one of the boots. And when he did that, he just shouted out, "Oh, my God." So he pulls off the boot again and picks out a piece of copper wire that was stuck inside the boot, and that copper wire had punctured his big toe, and this big toe is where he later developed cancer that could not be stopped. And so the question is, I mean, how many people get cancer, deadly cancer in your big toe? I don't think it's very common at all. I've never heard of it before, But what happened was that the person who gave them was a man called Peter Colby, a filmmaker, who is the son of William Colby, who was the director of the CIA.
Yes.
So is that by coincidence? I mean, in my world, if it's one time, okay, if it's 10 times, it could be a coincidence. If it's in the hundreds or thousands, when you look into cases like that, you have to just say, I mean, what are the chances? What are the chances? I'm not saying that Peter Colby knew about it, but I would very strongly suggest that maybe people surrounding his dad in this agency would have been part of supplying the boot to Bob. So, and also it was a very, very sad way that Bob Marley died, because he was sent to, he was more or less being pushed to an institute in Switzerland with a brutal doctor who was treating him so horribly and putting him through so many very, very painful experiences. A doctor that has later been, I don't know if this is true, but some researchers say that this is a doctor that was connected to the Nazi war machine. I can't remember his name right now, but and so that is also a man very much into eugenics. So would he really care about a Rastafari pot-smoking thing? But the thing with Bob Marley is he was not of course he smoked pot, but this was a very, very active guy, very, very well-spoken. He was also mixed race, so he was both white and black could identify with him, and his popularity was exploding. So they decided to take him out, and so he died a very slow death. And I think if you look at the effects of marijuana, what that has on cancer cells, it really slows it down, and sometimes CBD oil and other stuff can help cure cancer. So it's possible that he lasted so much longer. I think he died 81. We had John Lennon 80 and Bob Marley 81. They were hit more or less at the same time, but it took, that's not true. It was a bit earlier with Bob Marley, but it took some time to kill Bob. You got Peter Tosh as well. He was also murdered. So many of these front figures that were standing for change in the African American culture or the black culture, or all of these countries all over the world, that their leader just boom, chop. It's the same sad story. It's like Lady Di as well. One of the main reasons why she was taken out was because she got involved with anti-landmines.
Yes.
And landmines are so crucial for the New World Order military operations. Many of these mines are made by Sweden. I mean, come on. How a neutral country, I mean, how much does that stink? That is awful, I think, awful. And that used to be my own country. I think that is despicable. But anyway, the landmines are made now so that you can't find them, and they're made. The landmines are very important in the New World Order operation, because what they do with this is to get rid of the local population in areas where they want full control. So what they do is they go in, they create a war, or they have the US military in location, which is, when you look at these wars, most of it is about poppy or mineral oil, gas pipelines, has nothing to do with terrorism or ISIS, which is their own creation. Anyway, so the mines are used they spread them out in the hundreds of thousands, they dig them down. Some of they mark them or make them look like toys, and so that the local children pick them up, and boom, they get killed and so on. So the whole idea is to scare off the local population so that they will leave that area. And then you will see that these are very often strategic places for an airstrip, refueling fighter planes or bombers or whatever, and so often connected to drugs, which is one of the big income sources for these dark forces. So when Diana went out and said, this is not okay, and was talking to millions of housewives and other people that normally were not interested in these things, that freaked them out. And I think this was a major reason why her death came at the time where it came.
You're listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian.
What do you think, for those of us who are observing this and don't want the deep state to happen, what do you think we can do constructively, positively, to challenge it?
I wish I had a crystal ball. I wish I was more solution focused, but I'm not. So what I can say is that when you look at their operations, they're always aiming at fear. Fear is their tool. It is only through fear that they can control us, because, if we pull the curtain and more people start understanding how few these people really are, when you look on a global scale in the deep state, I think maybe I would say around 8,000, but I'm not totally sure, but it's in that sort of scale. And then you see the rest of this population on this beautiful planet Earth, flat or round or whatever it is. We're billions. So the balance is an absolute joke that they are controlling us. There's a beautiful animation called The Tiny Dot you can find on YouTube. Oh my God, it shows it so beautifully. And also a friend of mine who's a statistic, he said the balance, of them versus us, it's like you're standing on a big sandy beach. You pick up one grain of sand, that's them, and the beach, that's us. So this whole thing is done by deception. If we understand how few they are, we would laugh at them. We would never let them control us. So they need to go psychological. They need to control the media outlets. They need to control the information flow. Otherwise, we would see through it right away. So psychological operations and propaganda. So in one way, this is fantastic news, because that just shows us how weak they really are. And I would also say that I'm being heavily censored and shut down and all kinds of things. Why? Officially, because of hate speech. I challenge anyone to listen. I've done almost 1,000 interviews. You point out one word I've said out of hate or aggression or anything like that, absolutely you won't find it, because I'm not such a person. But they don't know how to shut us down, so they're blaming all kinds of this. And the censorship is really now showing its very, very ugly face, but also showing they're getting afraid. And the reason they're afraid of the truth. If we see through all of these illusions of power and deception, they cannot control us. So to get back to your question, if fear is the thing that they can control us with, that's why if you open mainstream media, I tell you 90% of it will be fear-based.
Mm-hmm.
Fearful, be afraid, be afraid. The world outside is horrible. But I think most of us, if we look out through the window, it's a beautiful world. If we look at the screen in front of us, it's a horrible world. So what is true and what is not? But if fear is the thing, and the beauty with fear is that it's not real. I can't give you fear. I can't say here, what color is fear? Where is it? Is it square? Is it round? Because it's only in your mind. And they are very aware of that. So they need to get in between our ears and affect us there. So what we can do is, the more we focus on letting go of fear and free yourself of fear, the harder we are to control. So just see how they use the methods against us. One of the other favorites they have is divide and conquer. Make each other hate each other because of race or religion or color or nationalities, whatever. It's one of the old tactics to go in, divide and conquer through wrong information. So if they say you should fear your neighbor, I say love your neighbor. If they say, divide and start blaming each other, I say let's unite. Let's stand together. Let's see if we can bypass all of these things that we're being pumped with. And just one of the things that I love is that we're being so pumped with information that we don't even know it's true. So I fear people, and maybe in my case, I don't know, but the ones that you fear could be black, yellow, big, with a beard, with a Muslim background, whatever. These people that you fear, I would suggest, why don't you buy them a coffee and just say, listen, I don't know why, but I'm afraid of you, and it feels really ridiculous. Would you mind? I'll buy you a coffee, let's just talk and see, because many times that person will be afraid of you because of the same type of information that is being pumped through their parts. So unite and start really see what you can do to lift the environment around you, your local community, your family, your friends. Lift them, empower them, and then inform yourself and see if you can start seeing through this deception of power, this deception of us needing rulers. I don't think so. When you look at the word government, do you know what that means? Governmente, control the mind control. That's the word of government for you. In other languages like German or the Scandinavian language, the government, the word for it is rulers. Mm-hmm. And I don't think, are they our rulers? Are we their slaves? I don't think so. We pay them to do us a service. So it's totally upside down, and we need to take the power back, but not violently, but by informing ourselves and really stepping out of fear, coming into more understanding of these methods that are being used. This is why I've focused so many years on trying to show the templates that are being used, so that people, just like if you have a cooking program, I would show you a recipe with the different ingredients of this dish. But this dish we're talking about here is terror, or the product of fear. That's the whole thing. It's to keep us fearful. So how do they do it? And that's where I've done many presentations, and I've been touring 15 countries, and I really am trying to do my utmost to be part of showing what's actually going on. And then just like a recipe for these false flag operations and alleged terror attacks, alleged assassination, they follow a very specific template. And the more of us that become aware of it, the earlier we can say, whoop, it's starting to smell like this. And then you start checking into it. You see, tick that box, tick that box, tick that box. And then, whoa, something might be going on here. And that's when something is being set up, like I said before, they always need the drill there to practice and train. And so they have to go out in local media and tell you about it. Today we're going to have this mass shooting drill or anti-terror drill for your protection. But sometimes it's for our protection. Sometimes it's part of these staged false flag operations. So I always try to get people to go there the day before or the day when these drills take part, and then openly film them while they set the whole thing up. Because, like, if it is a planned force flag operation, I tell you, they do not want to be observed. They are used to work in the shadows, pulling the strings, so we don't understand it. So they can play with our minds the way they want to. But if you go there and you make it very obvious to them that they are being filmed, and don't go alone, be a group at least, because there will be people in uniform, not saying that they're real police or security, they will use these uniforms and they will approach you, maybe in a aggressive way. But there are these beautiful apps. I think one of them is called Bamboozle, where you just click that and whatever you film goes live on YouTube. So you can just say, "Dear Mr. Officer, before you get angry with me or want to hit me in the head with your nice little stick there, be aware you're being filmed live on YouTube." So that has often a very cooling effect on a situation that could have gotten out of hand. But I just say all of us need to help each other to expose what's going on, to break the spell, wake each other up, And I would also recommend, if this is new to you, it's very easy to become obsessed once you start seeing how you've been deceived. It's almost like you lose a loved one. You have to go through stages of first the disbelief or big grief or depression or anger or despair. It goes in waves like that until you start coming to a point where you're more balanced. And in this process, I really would like to advise you, do not speak with the people you think are the ones that would understand you, like your family, spouses, close friends, and so on. Do not. Everyone goes through the same experience. It's like hitting your head right up against the wall, because the people around you love you the way you used to be, and now suddenly you turn into this strange individual, just like you become Jehovah's Witness or something, saying all of these horrible things about the world that I thought I knew. So it will never work. So I would suggest instead find local groups where you can maybe have a coffee once a week, where you can ventilate these things and with people that are open to it, instead of getting into this conflict, because there's no way around it. If you approach your close ones, it will be painful. And so first that, and then once you get in balance, then start living by example and show how to deal with this type of information without losing your inner balance. Purify your mind, focus on what you want to achieve, and then use the different skills and passions you have in creative ways of helping to lift this world, and let the truth lead the way.
I thank you very much. I think that's a perfect spot to end on. Some very sensible, useful advice. I can see you also have a newsletter you can subscribe to.
It's my website has been attacked so many times and blown to absolute pieces, but every time we manage to recreate it even better. And at this point, it's a very secure platform where I also use it as sort of like an umbrella, where other people that are being under heavy incoming attack from different sources, they can come in. So I bring in their information there as well. So, but under this cover, so that this information can be shared. And it's all of the web. It's a massive website, and all of the information is handpicked, but so that my intention is that it can be a platform where you can come. You don't have to spend hours and hours and hours surfing around. If you're interested in many of these areas, you can just go in. There's a drop down, whatever you're looking for, vaccination facts, chemtrails, you name it, boom, it's there. And then go from there and use that platform to sort of jump out and get possibly a clearer. Always doubt everything, including myself. Doubt it, ask questions. And I would very much like to advise, ask yourself 2 questions. When something happens, when something is there, boom, oh my God, something horrible has happened, something is being told, now, it's happening now. Okay, question number 1, is it true? Just ask yourself, is it true? Just because it comes in the form of digital information on the screen in front of you doesn't make it true. I can put anything up and just, if I'm in control of the outlet, I can just boom, write this, click enter. Doesn't make it true. It means that I published some numbers and letters does not make it true. So question 1, is it true? See if you can double check the facts, or go on location even better and check for yourself. Number 2, who benefits from me becoming afraid? Who benefits from me believing this thing? Because if it's their operation, it is there to push you into fear. That I can guarantee you. Because it's when we are bent over, we pull down our pants, we say, I surrender, that's where they want us. But I say it's the exact opposite. And this is where, if it's okay, just 1 minute. In this world, there are different basic ground rules, like gravity, like right, left, center, up, down. You know, these are some of these things you can't change. They're like constant. And so you also have frequencies, and everything is made out of atoms and frequencies, but on different levels. And then you have the highest of the highest frequency in this universe is what we call love. Not physical love, but love as a force. And the lowest is fear, absolute terror. So if you look at, there's beautiful experiments done in laboratories where they take a high frequency and a low frequency and they let them meet. So logic would say, well, they will fight and then end up in the middle somewhere. Absolutely not. What happens in this universe is that the lower frequency just, boom, it gets annulled. It disappears. Just like when you walk into a dark room, you switch on the light. It's not that the shadows are struggling, you know, I'm not leaving. Absolutely not. They're gone. And so I think that individuals like Jesus, Buddha, I see them as hackers. They crack the code to how this whole thing works. And so Jesus, who was a very courageous truth teller and brave individual, it seems, I think that what he said was, listen, guys, if this is the fact that a higher frequency annuls a lower one, that means that that is the solution to whatever the problem is. So why not go for love in every single situation? Whatever the problem is, it is on a lower scale and will be annulled if we can stay in that force. I think that is the key to the universe, and also the key to a much freer and much happier life, because the freer you are, the less controlled you are by fear, the happier you are, and the more good you can do in the world, the more you can empower other people, and so on. So how to get your frequency higher? I would say the key is gratitude. Not just thinking gratitude, I'm grateful for my cat, I'm grateful for my left foot. You have to feel it. The more you feel it, you pump up your frequency. And that, the more you are at that state, that is where they cannot get to you. And if you stop letting your mind be totally pumped up with the sewage outlet that you have in your living room, mostly in the shape of a screen, that is a dangerous one, I tell you, because once you start looking into the power structures behind who controls the media outlet, you should be aware. So I would suggest sometimes there's this beautiful red button on the remote. It's normally round and red. It says off. Turn it off. Turn it off. Try it. You might have shakings and withdrawals for a while, but there's this strange sensation after a few days of, is it happiness? Do I feel better? Yeah, because you have taken a step out of the line of fire. And so free your mind and let the truth, the beautiful, beautiful truth. I adore truth. It's so beautiful. It stands on its own. It fears no investigation, no attacks. It just is. Let that do the work, and be brave, excel, impress yourself, and make yourself proud. Stand in your truth, and don't go a violent way. Go compassionate, and let's transcend this whole thing.
Ole, that was lovely. Thank you very much. Very, very thoughtful. Lot of things to take away from that, and loved your final words there. Ole Dammegard, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Once again, a big thank you to Ole Dammegard, and remember to check out his website and sign up for his newsletter at www.lightonconspiracies.com. I have to say I totally endorse Ole's advice that you should always doubt everything, and if you don't want to live in fear and be bombarded by negative news, just turn off the television. We, that's Janie and me, stopped watching television and following mainstream mass media news services about 8 years ago. And since then we've definitely felt better and been better informed. You can find all the information elsewhere. Incidentally, don't forget, we, that's the makers of this radio show, now also publish a newsletter called Weird Times, and you can sign up for it at www.urbanfantasist.com. One final point on the Ole interview. We will be publishing the 2-part interview as one complete video on YouTube very shortly. You'll find it on the Weird Tales Radio Show channel, but there'll also be a link on the weirdtalesradio.com website. And that's it. Almost out of time, but before we go, here's some weird newspaper headlines from around the world, courtesy of the Fortean Times. From the Middlesbrough Evening Gazette in the UK, we have "Man remains in custody after death," while the I newspaper has the equally obscure "Dead cow kicks slaughterman." The Irish Times produced 2 headlines earlier this year that left us scratching our heads. They are "Judge to rule on racehorse who came back from the dead" and "Why do we fear the ghosts of dead policemen?" However, the award for the weirdest headline goes to the Washington Post, who in June 2019 ran a story with the headline, "It looked like a simple domestic murder. Then the police learned about the alien reptile cult. Perhaps they should call in some ghosts of dead policemen to help investigate that case." Now it just remains for me to say, this is Charles Christian saying until the next time we're together, stay well, stay weird, stay different, and remember, don't be like the King in Yellow. Wear a mask.
Black Shuck, the demon dog of East Anglia, is baying at the moon, which means it's time for us to go. You've been listening to the Weird Tales Radio Show with Charles Christian, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, magic, and folklore. You can keep in touch with us online at www.weirdtalesradio.com, by email to weirdtales@icloud.com, and on Twitter at Christian Uncut. Join us again next week for another edition of the Weird Tales Radio Show. Good night.